If you bet on sports and you're not making money, you're probably betting the wrong way. But after 5+ years of covering sports betting strategies, I found these 7 bets that sportsbooks hate because they give you the best chance of winning. And in the next 10 seconds, you'll learn one of these that will instantly improve your results. Let's get started. And that would be betting on niche sports. Some examples of this would be the WNBA, tennis, esports, USFL, Canadian football. Plain and simple, the less overall news and information and even data and statistics for a sport, the better. Many people won't take the time to find the information for these sports so you can actually get some good bets on them. So if you find that information, it's better for you. Now here's an example of limited statistics. If we go over to the WNBA stats, these are their advanced statistics. And you scroll over and you'll see offensive rating, defensive rating, assist percentage, offensive rebounding percentage. This is a lot better than what you would have had, let's just say 3 to 5 years ago in the NBA, but that's as advanced as it gets. If you compare it to the NBA, it is going to be a completely different story as far as the advanced stats go. You could break it down by clutch time, play type, tracking data on how many times they touch the ball or pass the ball, right? It is so granular in the NBA, the MLB, the NFL. Those advanced stats are much readily available. They're not niche sports. Heck, even the UFC is a sport that is not really built off of statistics. Sure, they are there when you look at stuff like takedown accuracy, takedown defense, sub averages per fight, but every single fight is so different that if you can find some of the information on who they're training with, who's at the camps that these guys are training with in the UFC, the coaches they're using, how they're kind of preparing for the fight, if you get that information, you're going to have a huge edge in the betting market. Of course, the UFC is no longer a niche sport, but the ways to find information and gain an edge is relatively niche still. So the question might be now for you, well, how do I find reliable news or information for these niche sports? Well, I think the best place to start is over on Twitter, where you can find some larger news sources for these niche sports like Underdog, their WNBA page, which will post news. More beneficial for you will probably be some of the local beat reporters, the team reporters, heck, even the players themselves for some of the niche sports, especially things like esports. Like, this is a great example of an awesome resource. 32 beat writers, 105,000 followers for the NFL, and I think some college football. They basically break down all the important news that beat writers are posting. They put it all in one spot and they summarize it for you in quotes or just in lists. This is going to be something for the NFL. You're not going to find that for smaller niche sports because there's not as much incentive for somebody to create an account around it. You can't have a business, whatever it might be, but that helps you if you're able to find that information. Now, I found an interesting statistic to kind of sum all this up. According to an Elite Sports article, professional sports bettors will make anywhere from 5 to 10% more ROI just from betting on niche sports. Now, those are a lot of the positives or ways to kind of bet on niche sports. There are, of course, some cons. It could be more time consuming and it could lead to you getting limited faster if not done right. Limited by the sports books just means that if you were to try and put $100 on a bet, they say, no, you're too good at this. We're only going to let you bet $5 or maybe even $1. But betting on these lesser known sports isn't the only way to find an advantage at the sports books. Let's get into player props. Because betting on player props, as you can see right here, if we scroll down, this is just an example for NBA on a site called Prize Picks. If you scroll down to rebounds, a player prop is pretty simple. If you don't already know, you take the more or less on a player's rebounds, and you can take this for any basically statistic in any sport. They're widely available at this point. There are a few reasons why betting on player props are more beneficial. It is easier to predict a player's individual performance rather than an entire team's outcome. Simply because there's less variables. You're dealing with one player as opposed to so many different players and so many coaches and everything else that goes into it when you're trying to predict a team's performance. And the other reason why it's pretty beneficial to be betting on player props is look at all of these opportunities here. If we just go to points for the NBA today, I can scroll and there's so many opportunities. These are all the players you can bet on their points just for today. One sport, one player statistic. We're looking at over 100 to 200 plus opportunities. That's just for one statistic in one sport. There's literally over 1,000 options in the market today for NBA alone. There's so many opportunities, which means there's more opportunities for the books to have a bad line out there, and that helps you. As opposed to that exact same game we were looking at all those props for, there's only one money line you can bet unless it's an alternative, one spread, one total, right? Way less options. It's a more efficient price on those lines. Now, while doing some research for this video, I found this statistic that I found pretty interesting here from the years of 2021 and 2022, 4 for 4. This is their website, an article they did. They said if you would have just blindly bet the under for a game, season-long props would have resulted in you winning 60 to 63% of the time. Season-long player props, that is. So literally just betting the under in 2021 to 2022, and I believe this is maybe a little bit of 2023 as well, you would have won 60 to 63% of the time, as good as it gets. And a reason for this, well, there's a lot of reasons, but betting the unders, you protect yourself from injuries. If a player gets injured, you win that bet actually, as opposed to taking the over, and the market generally likes to take the over, so there's somewhat of a percentage of the market being inflated a little bit. Taking the unders gives you the better odds. Now, these are the advantages to be betting on player props. What are some of the cons? Usually you can't bet as much on player props. There's a chance you get limited if you win too often, and it might take a little bit more time to research since there's more options to choose from. So when it comes to player props, there's a lot of props to be looking at, statistics that goes into every single player's performance. But what if I told you there's a betting opportunity in the markets that's just on information? Which takes us to another best bet you should be making at a sports book, the third one in this video, and that's just betting on information markets. The best best example of an information market would be the NFL draft. There's no statistics that go into the NFL draft. There's no player performance on there. It's just knowing who's going to be taken when. Are they going to go in the first round, the top 10, the number 1 overall pick? So that's one type of information market around these types of events like the NFL draft. Will you kind of get that information yourself or use some reasoning to figure out what will happen? Another type of information market, and really I just didn't know where to lump this in here, was this one right here. I actually watched this in a podcast called My First Million recently, specifically on the guy himself. I don't know how people view him, but he found a hack, you can say, back in the day, I think maybe the 2000s, the 90s, on betting on the NBA. He noticed that in the first half and the second half, they put the exact same point total lines there for first half total points and second half total points. Or if you were to go through this video, and I think it's like midway through, he realized that the second half of games had a lot more scoring because of intentional fouling, because of there being more motivation to potentially try and tie the game and get your best players on the court. All of these things kind of fueled the second halves to be higher scoring. So he was able to make a boatload of money, or so he claims, during that time because he found that information edge before anybody else did. It's harder to find now, but if you can find these, you can make a lot. Another example of an information edge is something that I post every single year, the final week of the season on Twitter. You can see this one. It's very popular now, 8 million views on these player incentives. I started posting these like 3 to 4 to 5 years ago when it was much less likely or much harder to find this information and source the data to find players' contract incentives. Now it's a little bit more out there, especially in the NFL, but if you can find stuff like this and take advantage of it for 1 to 2 to 3+ years, great. So information markets are pretty powerful in sports betting. They're harder to come by and they take a lot more work, but what if I told you there's another way you can do it much quicker? And this takes us to live betting. I'm pulling up DraftKings right here, and you can see their live betting platform, and you can basically choose any single sport. As of right now, these are the 5 sports: table tennis, which is crazy, volleyball, darts, cricket, and tennis as well. You can see all the live betting options right here, and this is pretty simple. You probably know what it is. Live betting is once the game or contest or event starts, once you can bet live on the outcome. Now, the reason why these are a little bit more beatable lines is because you're more likely to see an inefficient price because the sports books are adjusting the lines on the fly instead of having hours, days, and weeks to adjust the line. And even if their sports books are using an algorithm, sometimes the algorithm doesn't pick up what's actually happening in the game. Like maybe you saw a running back fumble or mishandle the ball, and now he seems to be a little bit benched or he's in the doghouse. Maybe you saw a player limping a little bit, but they're playing through that injury. You can actually use that information to your advantage if an algorithm by a live betting sports book doesn't use it properly. Now, you want to make sure, and this is what I would always say in the past when I first started, like you're getting a good live platform. Now all of these sports books have, at least most of them, I shouldn't say all, have a pretty good interface, especially live. The biggest thing is you don't want it to lag. You don't want it to be locking every single 2 seconds. Like, of course, in some sports like baseball, if you're trying to bet on what the next out or next pitch will be, yeah, it's going to lock pretty quick. You don't have that much time to get a bet in, but for the most part, make sure you're using a trustworthy site where it's not going to freeze. You may need to watch the event to take full advantage of this. You might get limited by a sportsbook if you're winning too often. There could be some emotional fuel going into your betting since you're watching the sport, and your decision making has to be much quicker. Now, betting on games live while they're going on could actually be a pretty good thrill for you as well. So that's another bonus that goes into it if you can control your emotions. But betting on breaking news situations is also important. But before we get into that, let me tell you about a place that I enjoy placing my player props on, and that is PrizePicks. I've been partnered with PrizePicks basically since the company started 4 to 5 years ago. We've been loving using their platform. I think their app is fantastic, as well as just the interface in general. And you can see the offerings right here. This is for the NBA. You can filter it by statistic, which is right here. You can filter it by sport, anything from esports to next season for the NFL season-long props, WNBA, every single sport you can think of is on here. They always run promotions as well. You can see one going on right now for 26 more minutes. You get 7 points off Jason Tatum, which is obviously something that I should probably go take advantage of right now. And here's the deal for you. If you sign up with the code SAL23, there's a QR code on the screen or a link in the description below. You'll get a free $50 to play with immediately upon depositing on PrizePicks when you use code SAL23 today. Like we said earlier in the video, player props are a great bet to be taking at the sports books, and you should also take advantage of promotions. Hint, hint, we'll get into that later on. So be sure to take advantage of this free $50 with code SAL23, QR code on the screen again, or the link in the description below. Now, the next best bet you should be targeting in sports books are static lines from breaking news. Now, there are some obvious versions of this. If we were to pull up PrizePicks right here, and let's just say Jason Tatum was to get ruled out of nowhere he's ruled out, there's probably going to be maybe a couple of minutes, maybe 1 to 2 minutes at most, where you'll get a nice line on Derek White, where his line won't change. Heck, now since the NBA is so big and player props are widely available, it's probably going to be a little bit less, 30 to 60 seconds. But that's because it's Jason Tatum, one of the best basketball players on the planet. If you're talking about the WNBA, where there's less available information, those lines might stay up there for a couple of minutes to even 10 plus minutes. I've seen lines in the USFL and these spring league footballs where they stay up there for like almost a day. Now, you're going to have some quick decision making when this happens. Maybe you can lean on some tools as well. I like to use Cleaning the Glass. They have an on-off tool. They also have, so when one player is on and one player is off the court, what happens to the rest? They have a lineups tool to see if there's a certain starting lineup. You can see how often they use that and how often players perform well at that. So Cleaning the Glass is one. RotoViz is another one. one for the NFL where you can see, okay, how does Joe Burrow perform when T. Higgins or Jamar Chase is not playing? You might not have that much time though overall. That would be more so helpful for niche sports. So really the decision making just comes to knowing that this line is still static even though a key player just got ruled out. And sometimes the key player isn't obvious, and that's usually where you can find your best edge. Like oftentimes an offensive lineman will get ruled out for a game and really the running back's line doesn't move when it probably should if it's a good offensive lineman. Same thing for the defensive side of the ball. If a key defender, a cornerback, gets ruled out for a game, sometimes the number one wide receiver's line won't change at all when it probably should by at least a yard or two. As someone who is locked in, a lot of it has to do with my job, into all the news sources and just love sports, I feel like I'm pretty up to date on a lot of news, especially in niche sports. If that sounds like you, this could be an advantage you should take advantage of, the breaking news, the static lines from breaking news. Now, the next thing you need to take advantage of, we kind of hinted at it earlier, because why not just get risk-free bets when you can? And that is number 6 here. You should take advantage of every single promotional bet and bonus from a sportsbook that you can. So what are these promotional bets? Well, you've probably seen them, whether they're boosts in a sportsbook, it's a deposit bonus like PrizePicks is giving you when you sign up with code SAL23, you get a free $50. All these types of things they want you to get on their platform, so it's marketing budget that they're putting out there to you, and you can just take advantage of it. Now, a couple of pro tips: be sure to read the terms of service on these. Sometimes you have to roll them over a lot, but in a competitive market we're in right now in the sports betting world, usually you don't have to roll them over at all, maybe once. Also, this is just my preference. Maybe there's some sort of mathematical equation somebody could put out there to solve this, but I like to, if I get a free house money $50, $500, $100 bonus, just put it on a long shot thing that could happen and is maybe correlated. This is what we did back over on Thanksgiving when we had a $500 free play on Underdog. You can see right here, $500, and we put it on a somewhat correlated play for some of these games. On Thanksgiving, we turned a 7-pick entry into $9,300 from a $500 free play. It cost us absolutely nothing. We had that free deposit bonus or some sort of bonus over on Underdog, and we were able to turn it into nearly $10,000. I know a lot of people would just say, oh, I have a free $500. Let me put it on the minus 10,000 favorite and just get a free $40. Well, first off, that favorite could lose, but also, what is that $40 really doing for you in the long run? It is house money. My personal preference is to try and get the most out of it that I can. Now, the final best bet in a sportsbook you should be taking is one that kind of has some mixed reviews on my end, but I still think overall it's a quality bet to be taking, and these are season-long props. But you need to be careful with this, because if it's not done right, it could actually harm you. The pro tip here is what we talked about earlier from this 4for4 article back in 2021 and 2022. Just blindly betting the under on season-long props would have resulted in 60 to 63% hit rate, literally because of injuries, because of maybe some players or a coach got fired and it shook up a ton of stuff. Just leaning on the unders in general would lead to a winning strategy, a significantly high winning strategy. And another tip you can look at is what we talked about earlier for the incentives. I mean, this is one specifically for the NFL, but you can try and find them for other sports as well. Knowing some player incentives can help you with season-long props. If you know these incentives before the season, heck, if you know that a player prop is set at 750 yards, but they have an incentive of $1 million to get 800 plus yards, they're going to be literally incentivized to try and hit that over on the prop for you. Now, where I personally find these player props when I make my threads, and maybe this is giving away too much information, but as I come over to Spot Track, there's also a couple. Over the Cap is another one that leads this information in there for you. You can just see at the bottom of the contract, you might have to sign up for a subscription. The contract notes you can see right here: annual incentive, $2 million for being top 10 in receiving yards catches, $3 million for 70 catches, 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns. This is for Mike Evans this past year. There's a bunch that you can find in there. You kind of have to filter through all of them, but it's really quality information if you take the time to do so. Luckily for you guys, I kind of put that thread together each year. Now, there are certainly cons to betting on season-long props, and this is where it starts to become sort of a mixed review for me, and here's why. The biggest con is that your money has to be tied up all year, and this would be the downside, because if you only have 100, maybe 1,000, whatever your budget is, and you should have a budget when doing this, you should be managing that budget as well if you want to actually try and win money. What gets measured gets managed, in my opinion. Well, if you have that, once you allocate 10 to 20 to 50% of your budget to that season-long prop, it's just baked in there for 3 to 6 plus months, depending on the season-long of the sport that you're betting on. Meanwhile, if you're just betting weekly, you can try and turn that money over. You bet a day, you can bet the next day in the NBA, the next day, and try and turn it over and grow it bigger if you're betting effectively. So this is really just a preference thing. If you think that that's just something you like betting on and you have a pretty good edge there, and you're somebody who's taking a bunch of unders and the right unders, and you think you have a huge ROI and it makes more sense to bet season long, well, then go for it. Because as of recent years, as we showed earlier in that article, there is still clearly an edge in season long prop betting if done correctly. So these are my 7 best bets when it comes to the ones that you should be taking out of sportsbook. Drop in any that you have in the comment section as well that I might have missed. And don't forget to take advantage of the promotional offer that we've already talked about in this video. The QR code's on the screen right now. When you join with code SAL23 on PrizePicks, you get a free $50 to play with. There's also a link in the description below. That is code SAL23. I appreciate you all for tuning into this video. We'll have more betting strategy content out on this channel as well, so be sure to hit the subscribe button before you go, and I'll see you in the next one.